Well, this morning we're here interviewing Robert Lever. I'm Gez Lamb, one of Robert's colleagues, and we're interviewing him about his book here, which is the Still Point of the Turning World, The Art and Philosophy of Osteopathy, which in my opinion is a book that is long, long overdue and should be read by every osteopath because for the reasons that I hope will come out in the questions that I'm going to ask Robert now. He and I have worked together for many years. I understand his approach as he understands mine, and this book is long, long overdue. So, without further ado, Robert, why another book on osteopathy?
Well, there are, as you imply, several books on osteopathy. This one is decidedly not a textbook or a how-to-do book. It's a very personal reflection and perspective on a lot of what is, in my view, important and largely neglected in discussions on osteopathy. And I've deliberately called it the art and philosophy of osteopathy in order to try to balance the growing field of science that actually underpins what we do very effectively, but to try to make the point that practitionership has another dimension to it, and that is the attitude, the development of skills, and the overall approach to many broad-based issues in life, which I think make a huge difference to the way we practice. So it's a very different view, perhaps. It may excite a little bit of argument. It's not a definitive view, but I hope it stimulates people to actually think in terms of their own approach to the art of practice, and that's basically why I wanted to do it. The profession is also in crisis, which it very often has been in its history, and by that I mean that the profession has had problems defining its scope. It's had problems in defining what it does, what it purports to do, and I felt that there have been many myths and misinterpretations attached to the practice of osteopathy, and I wanted to clear some of those up and, if possible, create a certain balm that might help bring people of apparently divergent attitudes a little bit closer to some kind of unified understanding of what it is we do.
Thank you. It's a very personalised approach. I mean, most of the books written on osteopathy from an academic point of view, or they reporting on the history of osteopathy, but this is truly from a very personalised viewpoint. Can you justify that?
Well, the beginning of the book is something more of an overview, which I hope is relatively accurate and to some extent objective. But to answer your question, I think more and more that the practice of what we do needs to become very personal. We all learn the same principles, techniques, etc. And of course we favour certain techniques over others, we favour certain approaches over others. But in the end, it's only when we make the art our own that we move beyond that and that we actually develop our practitionership, as it were, when we throw away our L plates and we actually develop something that has our own personal flavour to it. There are, in my view, no definitive treatments, and I think that what's important is to realise that there are many valid approaches to any particular patient's problem, and I want to place a value on the individual perspective here. Mine is not definitive. It's a question of suggesting that there is room for a personalised approach, and if my book is one of those and it excites a little bit of controversy and argument on the way, then the profession's used to that. It's very used to disagreement, it's very used to argument, but I think sometimes argument can yield quite positive results.
You put a lot of emphasis in the book. There's a lot of talk about evidence-based osteopathy, which has become the watchword these days, and you seem to fly in the face of it in part. Can you explain that?
Well, in doing so, I'm not trying to deride the need for evidence. I'm not trying to deride the need for rational, strategic thinking in our work. I'm not implying for a moment that we can rely entirely on an intuitive approach to the work. But the problem is with any kind of holistic system, it becomes extremely difficult to adopt an evidence-based research approach in the way that you can when you're examining allopathic medical procedures, such as the use of certain drugs and certain surgical procedures. I say certain surgical procedures only because personally I don't think that surgery is a standard product either. I think that, as I've often said in the book, there's a difference between a competent surgeon and a great surgeon, and it's interesting to ponder exactly what that is. What I'm trying to suggest more and more is that there isn't a formulaic approach to things, that what we're really looking at is the fact that there are many different approaches, and that because each individual patient presents with their own version of a particular problem, and each practitioner brings their own approach to a particular problem, it's very, very difficult to cultivate an evidence-based research protocol. And really I'm simply making that point because every time we try to be evidence-based about what we do, I think we end up with a very misleading result. I often say, or I've mentioned in the book, that it's a bit like trying to evaluate the efficacy of a golf swing. We know it works, but it's very much better in some golfers' hands than others. So we have to bear that in mind, that where there is a skill element, it becomes very difficult to look at a purely evidence-based approach with the use of randomized clinical trials in the way that you can in allopathic medicine.
Thank you. There's a name that stands out in the book in terms of osteopaths through the ages, and that is our colleague and mentor Tom Dahmer, who died many years ago now. I know how he influenced my approach to osteopathy. Could you say how he's influenced your approach?
Yes, Tom was an extraordinary man. He had a profound influence on me. He was, as I said in my dedication, my mentor. We spent many years working closely together. He was extraordinary in that you could spend time with Tom talking about almost anything, whether it was music or food or whatever it was, and something of the art of what he did osteopathically would rub off on you, which was extraordinary, but it did. And it really made me realize how, as I say in the book, it's so much to do with who you are as a person that programs your way of working with patients the way you are in practice. And Tom was a great example of this. He was also a practicing Buddhist, so there were many philosophical ideas there that rubbed off on me, and many of these contributed to what I speak of in the book as the spiritual dimension in much of what we do. He also had extraordinary hands. He was an incredible technician. His hands and his technique were remarkable. And through Tom and through observing him work, one could develop aspects of skill that one found it very difficult to articulate verbally, but one could somehow learn from him, almost as an apprentice learns. And he managed to impart that very largely non-verbally. And it's so often the non-verbal aspect of skill and of practitionership that contains enormous value. So yes, I place considerable emphasis and value on having known Tom and having worked very closely together over many years, and I know that applies to you as well. And much of what we've taken forward in our teaching, I know, has been based very much on what we learned from Tom 30, 40 years ago.
For sure. Well, Robert, thank you very much indeed. And I've written a review for this book in the college alumni magazine, the ESO magazine. And I wish you every success with this book. It really does deserve to be read by every osteopath, because I think it gives a dimension that I have never seen put down anywhere else before in this form. And so I wish you great luck with it.
Thank you, Gez. Thank you very much.
Thank you.